Alrighty, welcome back everyone. I know you have definitely noticed I have not been posting as often last week, and I apologize for that. I've been sick, if you cannot tell by the sound of my voice, and so I just decided, you know what, in order to kill this thing, I'm gonna have to take some time to recover, which is what I did. So now we are back, and we're getting on a video I am very excited about. We are going to be looking at unit compositions and exactly what is the best way to composite your army and the positive and negative of each different variety of compositions. So we're going to be only looking at Armada T1 bots, T2 bots, and then also Armada T1 vehicles and T2 vehicles. So the vehicles will be at the end of the video, the bots will be at the beginning, starting with T1 bots. So most commonly you'll see ticks used as like a spam, and we've already done videos talking about ticks, so we're not going to go over a huge discussion about ticks, but you can integrate them essentially the same way as you would with pawns. So that's the main reason I want to have them here, is these will be used very similarly if you want to incorporate them into your main army. So my favorite composition that I like to have is my front line of centurions and then a raiding group of pawns or even some ticks mixed in there. Now, ticks are very fast and harder to hit and able to turn on a dime. So the benefit of having ticks in your composition would be for the sole fact of making it hard to cause damage. Like if you're up against a plasma bot is not going to be able to target a tick as easily because of the fast movement. Plasma bots take a second to target, and then they also shoot, and it takes a second for them to for the shot actually to land. So with the tick, you can cause them to constantly aim and try to find where that tick is going, and they're not going to be able to land their shot very well. So it's more of a distraction fire. I haven't seen very many people actually incorporate ticks in the early game for that purpose, but they could be pretty nice against plasma or rocket bots for that reason. Now, one thing a tick is going to be terrible against is the centurion, because any laser fire is generally more accurate than a plasma shot. So just keep that in mind. If you're up against centurions or a bunch of light laser turrets, the ticks will not be as effective. So let's get back into centurions, why I like to use them. They are very tanky. They have a very high health of 1,500 health, and pawns are relatively weak, right? But they have a pretty good DPS of 90 damage per second once they get within range. So what I like to do with this composition of some lighter raiding units mixed in with some centurions is I will push the enemy with my centurions so that they're taking fire and there's a battle here. And then I will also bring in my lighter units after the battle has already started and try to bring them up behind the enemy. So now the enemy, let me erase this. The enemy is sandwiched between my bulky army and my light army, because these guys were already not taking quite as much damage because the heavier units were aggressing first. So that can help with creating a bonus damage by attacking forward and attacking backward and getting bonus damage off. So that's one of my favorite ways to compose my army, and you'll see that most frequently when playing in my games. Another thing that are more common is plasma bots, as well as like some light raiding bots as well. That's a pretty basic composition. So most often used with like pawns, and it's very similar concept. Plasma bots have a bit of a longer range, and they're a little bit faster, I think, than a centurion, if I remember correctly. Speed of 40, oh, just barely. One speed per second faster, so not really significant. But they do have that longer range, and it is good to note that they have a area of effect damage as well. And recently, this is a good thing to note, is the Plasma Bot recently got an update where the shots fired from it they're able to shoot better in a cluster. So if they're all close together now and they're like walking, they can shoot over the top of each other better. They should all still be able to shoot here. Oh, except this guy. So I guess it's not perfect still. He still struggles. But they did an update to make it so they're a little bit more effective. But yeah, with Plasma Bots, if you line them up like this is something you have to be weary of. Just be aware of how they work. If you line all of them up and try to shoot over the top of each other, only one will be able to fire. So just keep that in mind. It makes it a little bit harder for all of them to be as effective. Now, another thing that I see used frequently is no raiding bots at all. And instead we'll have essentially just our rocket bots. Now, I don't love this as much because with our rocket bots, they do have longer range, but they also will indiscriminately fire against their allies. So if you're... Oh, no, not that. Let me see, stop. I'm so used to pressing 2. But if you have these guys, like, going around firing, you can accidentally hit your allies. And look at how much damage that's doing just by them shooting. All because you aren't microing it properly. So that's the risk with this mixture. And one of the reasons why I don't like rocket bots is because they are much easier to friendly fire on yourself. So you're essentially creating a self-damaging unit at that point. So those are the main ways you'll see units used. I honestly prefer Centurions over Plasma Bots, just because of the extra health. And they do have a lot of DPS if they end up trying to push you. And then I like to use raiding bots over rocket bots. If I do build rocket bots, I'll often have a lot less of them, just for taking out static defense. And I'll try to mainly go for some raiders instead. Alright, now let's look at the T2 over here, which started moving down towards the other area because of my mismanagement of my button clicking. Anyway, so T2 bots, oftentimes, T2 bots for Armada anyway, oftentimes you'll see people go out with hounds first because they are quite cheap. One hound only costs 300 metal and 9,000 or 6,000 energy, so it's relatively cheap. A little bit of a higher energy cost, but not very expensive as far as metal. And for that, you also have quite a significant range advantage. Like, one hound microed properly can end up being very difficult for even a bull to handle, because they can move around and manipulate terrain to their advantage. Now, the negative of a hound is the fact that it doesn't have very much line of sight. It's about half the distance in line of sight here. Okay, whereas its range is much further than its line of sight. So keep that in mind with hounds. It is very important that you build a early radar bot, because that has an increased line of sight of 900, which is even further than what the hound can shoot at. So having these radar bots mixed in, very good composition early game, especially for bots, is to have radars mixed in there. If you want to make it even stronger, you can add some radar jammers, and that means that these guys will be able to not get hit as easily by just radar dots. So any artillery that might be shooting at them, any mortar fire, whatever it might be, these guys will be protected from the auto firing of those longer range weapons. So definitely add a radar bot in there, and a radar jammer bot as well, and that'll make your guys much more able to counter anything that your enemies might throw at you. Now, another composition we see quite frequently, which we're going to want the radar and radar jammer in here for that as well, and that is the sniper bots. Sniper bots are very expensive as far as energy goes. 2,000 energy per sniper bot. And they also take energy to go invisible. So it costs 200 if you want to cloak them. And then it also costs energy to fire them. I don't know if it... yeah, it's 500 energy for a reload. So every shot costs 500 energy. So that makes them a very energy intensive unit. And they're also very vulnerable to tick spam as well as other artillery shots. So just be mindful of that. That is why you will often see them mixed with radar and radar jammers. The radar has a line of sight of 900 like we talked about, and the line of sight is perfectly matched with the sniper's range of fire. So a single radar bot can give a sniper the full length needed to shoot their weapon in sight. And then the radar jammer just helps things like, let me see over here, we got the missile truck. The missile truck can outrange the snipers, and they have a very large explosion radius, which we'll be getting more into later. So just keep in mind there that certain things can outrange the snipers and devastate them, which is why radar bots are often used in that mixture. Now, the shock bots are often also used in a combination with the snipers, and that's because they bounce lightning shots from multiple targets. So if you had 3 ticks pushing you, okay, if you had 3 ticks pushing you, one sniper shot could take out all 3 with, or not sniper, one welder shot could take out all 3 of those ticks, no problem. So the fact that they have lightning attack makes them very good at defending again for the snipers and maintaining the front line without being overwhelmed with spam. So if things get dicey, they can definitely assist. Another thing is that they are very high health, of almost 3,000 health, whereas a sniper only has 500. So it adds as a good front wall, a front line of defense when needed, to just have the shock bots available to push up and defend against oncoming tanks and anything that's a little bit heavier that might get close to your snipers. Now, another thing that I have seen used a little bit more frequently now, and that is the Fat Boys being implemented into your composition. Let's actually check this out. They have a burst damage of 800. So a blob of fire at quite a distance, 700 range, almost the range of a sniper. A giant explosion, 800 damage right there. So these are very effective units at just making sure people are not going to be pushing you. They can get taken out by snipers pretty easily, and just because one sniper could probably kill one of these. Maybe it might take 2 shots to kill a fat boy with a sniper. Let me actually check on that. Let me see. Yeah, 2,000 damage, 2,500 damage per shot. A fat boy. It would take like 3 to 4 shots to take out a fat boy with a sniper, and they do outrange them. So snipers would be a good counter, especially with how slow the fat boy is. But fat boys are really decent at just making sure no pushes happen. And if you do go with fat boys, I would recommend building like maybe even a wall system in front of them. That way they can just stay there, and if something gets too close, you can just, you know, hold them back. And it'll block like sniper fire and stuff like that, and cause a little bit extra health, especially since they're quite expensive at 1,400 metal. That's a very expensive investment. I would also recommend putting shock bots in front of your fat boys as well. The reason being is the fat boys are good at taking out large clusters of units, but if you end up getting a bunch of tick spam going into your fat boys, then your fat boy could end up shooting right here, and blowing up all of your units on the front here. So you want to make sure that you have something that has a little bit further range that can take out the ticks at maximum distance, so that all the fire stays away from your core army, so you don't end up killing yourself essentially. Also, with the hounds, what I would recommend is that you don't use them too late into the game. I feel like they start to become a little bit less effective after the early stages of the mid game, just based on the fact that they they don't really have a huge DPS. Let me see, how much damage per shot is it? It's 400 damage per shot versus Gauze. I don't know if it tells you the difference. Ballistic. So it's kind of hard to see. Oh, the Gauze cannon right there. So the Gauze does 170 damage per shot, whereas the plasma cannon does 250 damage per shot. Compared to other things, though, it's like a Fat Boy is going to be much more effective than a Hound later on in the mid game. So I definitely recommend transitioning to either snipers or Fat Boys once you get into the later game. I think you'll find a little bit more benefit than the Hounds, just because they don't have quite the DPS needed to hold off a lot of the better T2 and T3 units that will be coming. Anyway, that's my recommendation. You can obviously do what you want. And now we got the vehicles over here, which we got T1 vehicles. This is my favorite composition for vehicles, where I will mix in an even number of stouts with an even number of Janisses. Now, reason for this is the fact that stouts have almost 2,000 health, and a Janus has about 1,000 health. Stouts have a regular rate of fire. Per shot is what, like almost 1 shot a second, whereas the Janus takes 8 seconds to reload. Now the Janus, though, has a huge damage output and a little bit of a longer range. So let's try to showcase this. So a Janus side by side with the Stout. The Stout is able to shoot out to here, and the Janus is able to shoot out to here. So the Janus has a little bit longer range, which can be nice. And the Stout is a little bit faster. So I find that these units work very well in composition together, because the Stout is naturally going to be up front taking the hits, and the Janus is naturally going to be in the back popping off larger damage per second, or larger damage total in like a very large area of effect. I mean, look at how large that area is. It's almost the same damage radius as a Fat Boy. So just think of that. That's very big. And I think it's like 1 or 2, no, it's like 2 or 3 missiles from a Janus direct hitting on a medium tank will kill it. So it's very effective. And if you have them clustered up, then it's even more effective. So yeah, when you're pushing with this group, your Stouts will take all the hits, and then your Januses can do follow-up fire. Now, what I recommend with this composition is to always do a poke maneuver. I've already explained this a little bit in one of my videos, but it's been a while since I talked about it. So with a poke maneuver, what you want to kind of do is weave in and weave out and make like circles of attack. So you're going to want to be constantly going in a circle to basically do a reset. And the reason why you want to do this circular motion of attack is because you're giving your Janus optimal time to reload their fire. So when you push, oops, oh, I did it again. Stop. I'm so used to pressing that button. Anyway, so when you're sorry, I completely lost my spot. Alright, so when you're pushing in, your Januses will end up unloading their payload, and as soon as they launch their payload, you want to start curving back, which then lets you be out of combat, reloading, and then once you're done reloading your Janus shots, you can swing back into combat, hopefully your stouts are taking most of the hits again, and then swing back out of combat. And this will just keep your Janices at more of a maximum damage per second without taking too many hits in between. So that's how I like to use them. Now, some people don't prefer to use the Janus. I believe that's a mistake. Some people do like to use the artillery pieces. Shell Shockers, I believe. Yep, Shell Shockers. These guys do have a very long range, but are very, very susceptible to pushing from lighter units or even like tanks. Basically anything can really push a Shell Shocker and take them out. I would recommend it's good to have a couple of them just to be able to take out excuse me, a little bit of residual cough from my previous illness. But it's good to have a couple Shell Shockers in your composition at in my opinion at all times, just to be able to take out further away harassments. Like, say if someone has a Mex here, you can take it out with a Shell Shocker, and then that means that a unit has to go and build that Mex again, which can make it so that your units have a little bit of an advantage and be able to push up and take the area and do some extra damage, while maybe some units aren't able to repair the front as easily, things like that. And it can make the game a little bit more micro-intensive for the person you are up against. Now, so I do like Shell Shockers, but I think they're a little bit more situational than the Januses, because the Janus, you can, even if they build a lot of defenses, the Janus is just so strong it can usually pop through those defenses when backed by stouts. I like to have a couple raiding tanks like the Blitz alongside. They're good for catching a push. Say for instance my tanks are all over here and the enemy pushes in with some blitzes to try to get around my defenses. It's good to have blitzes coming in to counteract that push and scoop up any aggression that they might be pushing towards my base. So I like to have a couple of them available. They're obviously quite weak, but they do have a decent DPS of 90. They're essentially a pawn. So definitely think about using those. One also very good composition is having a Janus Stout mixture along with a couple Whistler tanks. Now, Whistlers are very slow, and they do have a very low DPS of only 19 damage per second, but they are very good at anti-air. So if you do gain the advantage and you are pushing at your enemy line and taking ground, having your Whistlers available to take out any shurikens or gunships that come in and try to harass your tanks will be massively effective and very valuable. And also they do cause a irritation to the front line because they have such an extended range. They can do chipping damage, making honestly they're kind of a what do you call it, an emotional aggression versus actual like damage, because it's emotionally frustrating to always be taking damage by little missile trucks and not being able to do much back. So definitely incorporate those if you are worried about shurikens. Those can really mess up your day. So just take a look at that and possibly add those into your composition. Another thing that a lot of people use is Missile Janus. I've heard complaints about that. And I would say Missile Janus is going to be the weakest against smaller light units, such as the Blitz. Like if you get, let me see, how many Januses are there? 5 Januses and 5 missile trucks. How much metal is that? That's 2,000 metal. If you got 2,000 metal worth of blitzes and you slowly pushed in, like you made sure all the Januses didn't pop every single one of your blitz in a big like group, then you could definitely wipe out that composition with some blitz rushes. The recommendation I would give you if you're being harassed by that style of play is to let them push into you past their defensive line. So normally they'll have like a defensive line here where you have turrets here and they have turrets here, and we'll just say the blitzes are what they're up against. Obviously you're going to get harassed by all of these guys, right? They're going to be harassing you. So let them push you, break your defensive line, and just keep falling back, not taking damage. Build up a group of blitzes till they push past their defensive line, where now they don't have any laser fire or anything to defend. And you want to build up a group of light units to then push them. So after they've come through and they have taken all of your defenses and stuff, you can push them with a good, decent group of light units, obviously more than this, and you'll be able to win. Like, all the Janices will fire, they'll start to try to retreat, but they won't be able to retreat fast enough. You'll push in on them with the blitzes and take them out relatively easily. Add a very good metal trade as well. Okay, that's about it. The T1 vehicle compositions are pretty simple, pretty interesting, and most of them have very decent uses. Shell shockers, I would definitely recommend using the more narrow that the lane is. So in this area, shell shockers are going to be a little bit better than if the map was a bit wider, where you had more space to work with. Because if the enemy is only able to be in this little section, there's a lot more opportunity for this area of effect to do damage regardless of how they move. So the smaller the area that they have to work with, the better shell shockers will be. Alrighty, moving on to T2 vehicles. Now, something I've been seeing become more meta is the what are they called? Mauser. The Mausers more frequently have been used than previously when I've been playing. And also the Starlights, they've been getting very popular as well. We'll be looking at why here though right now. So Mausers are very, very good early as like an early T2 unit. I think of them similar to a Hound in how they work. They just aren't quite as mobile. They have a decent burst damage of 260, which is a little bit more than a Hound when it's on heavy plasma. And I think their shots fire a little bit faster. Yeah, I mean, well, maybe no, it's about the same. It's about the same speed, but they do have a larger area of effect as well. So that can be very nice when needing to do some mass damage to early T1 units. Excuse me. Like I said, my cough. Still having throat problems. Anyway, so you got your Mausers. These guys are able to rain down decent fire. I think they have a little bit longer range compared to a Hound, a range of 820 versus a range of 650. So definitely get some vehicles, some radar vehicles in there. They will be able to maximize that range a little bit more and make it so that the Mauser is most effective and optimally able to shoot. So I would definitely put all of those in the same grouping. Now, the reason why you might want to pop out a couple Mausers early is the fact that they don't really have that big of a cost. 320 metal cost, that's very, very low, along with 4,000 to 5,000 energy, pretty close to that. I would also back them up with some lightning tanks, which don't cost that much either. Now, the lightning tanks are very decent against most T1 units, and that's why I would definitely recommend having those available. So if they come pushing you with, say, some blitzes or stouts, or even the Janus, you can do some decent damage with the Jaguars and hold your own with them. You might not have quite a perfectly efficient trade, but with the Mausers putting in damage as well, you'll do all right. So a decent amount of damage and trade off there. So these can help just with early defense. Now, the reason why I would go for the Jaguars as an early T2 unit is because the The other option is the bull, which costs 1,000 metal and 13,000 energy. Very expensive. These are obviously much tankier and much more capable of dealing with most units, but they come at a hefty cost. So early, this will get you what you need to be able to have a decent early game advantage, in my opinion. And then we also have the Ambassador, a bit more of an expensive missile truck. We'll get these guys off to the side. Gonna want to use the Jaguars more as well. One of my favorite compositions, maybe not the most effective composition, but one of my favorite compositions, and that would be missile trucks. But often I will either have them on hold fire, or I will have them on very targeted positional attacks, just due to the sheer range they have. Let's look at this. The range is 1,300. That's larger than most anything else in the game as far as T2 goes. As far as I'm aware, I mean, maybe the rocket bots for Cortex have a little bit of a longer range, I don't know. But these can take out snipers, they can take out static defenses that are really far away. They're decent harassment, and especially if something's a static defense, you can just pound it with a couple of these rocket tanks and they'll be shredded. I like to have the bulls up here because they're very effective at taking out any lighter things that might come in. And then I also like to have the lightning tanks as well, just for I might even have them mixed in with the bulls, either off to the side or mixed in. Off to the side if the map is a bit wider and I want to, you know, keep people from pushing through to my base, I can have lightning tanks do similarly to what you would have the blitzes do for T1 and just catch any raids that might be going through. And they can also be good at taking out tick spam that's pushing towards you, as they have that same lightning spread damage where they bounce off of targets and kill grouped units a little bit faster. So these are good at taking out ranged targets, but you have to be very careful because they can also do a lot of damage to your vehicles. If they're aiming at a tank, if they're aiming at a tick that's pushing you, not very handy, and ends up killing your guys. So just be mindful of that. Very good, but be very cautious with, because you can do a lot of allied damage with that. Also, we have the Starlight. These are kind of like mobile pulsars. They're very, very good. The tachyon weapons, yes, very effective units, but very costly. 1,200 metal and 13,000 energy cost, and they cost 1,000 damage or 1,000 energy per shot. So use them sparingly and carefully, because if you're shooting at ticks, you're spending more metal per tick than you are gaining per shot. So just energy converting is going to be more valuable to convert all that energy into metal than it is to even shoot the gun itself. So just be careful with them. I know they're very popular, very good at taking out something like a bull or even jaguars. They have a very long range as well, of almost 1,000 range. They could take out snipers because of the range they have, a little bit longer range than them. So they're very effective, but be very careful because they can eat up a lot of metal in how much they cost to produce and how much they cost to shoot. They also have a problem where if you end up needing to run them back, you end up losing them. Look at how slowly they turn. Very slow units, and they cannot shoot behind themselves. So they can only shoot, let's see the distance here. Right there, they can shoot perfectly diagonal. So yeah, just keep that in mind. They are very powerful units, but in my opinion, sometimes overbuilt. and maybe not quite as effective as people give them credit for. So that's the basics of unit compositions for bots and vehicles in Armada. I will be making another video very similar to this eventually. I will put it on the schedule and get that done. I have a lot of videos planned for you guys, and if you got value, definitely subscribe. We'll be providing more Beyond All Reason content as always. And yeah, let me know in the comments if you want to see a certain type of video or have a certain type of question that you cannot find an answer to. I would love to provide some value to you in that way. And as always, I will see you guys on the battlefield.